Hi, everyone. So excited to have you guys all on today. I think it's going to be a really fun event. My name is Zoe, and this is our second installment of the Brandeis Studio Tours. We started this idea because we wanted to see how artists are being creatively inspired over quarantine, and in addition, just wanted to explore the many different paths that Brandeis artists can move on. Today, we're speaking with three artists about how a Brandeis education has informed where they are in their artistic lives and also how quarantine and today's political environment has affected their creative processes. This event is hosted by the Brandeis Arts Network. This network is a group of Brandeis alumni who work together to encourage art professionals and art enthusiasts alike to experience and work with fellow Brandeisians on campus and beyond. If you want to know more about the Brandeis Arts Network, we'll be posting a Facebook link at the end of the call. In addition, I just wanted to quickly go through all of the artists who we're speaking with today. The first artist, his name is Marlon Forrester, and he goes by he, him pronouns. Marlon attended Brandeis from 1999 until 2003. He double majored in creative writing and studio art, and then he also went on to earn his BFA at Tufts and his MFA at Yale University. While at Brandeis, he was a member of the Meyercraft Transitional Year Program, and he also played on the Brandeis basketball team. Go Judges! Currently, he is a Boston Public School art instructor, a grad studio visiting artist at the Maine College of Art, and he also has several upcoming commissions in the New England area. Our next artist, her name is Nomi Safran-Han. She goes by she, her pronouns. Nomi attended Brandeis as an undergraduate from 2004 until 2008. She majored in studio art and art history, and she went on to receive her MFA from Yale University. While she was at Brandeis, she was a SIPCA scholar, and she worked in the library. Nowadays, Nomi teaches painting at both Purchase College and Montclair State University. She recently had a show at the Slag Gallery that was written up by the New York Times. And last month, Nomi received her American citizenship. Yay. The last artist we have is Bronte Velez. Bronte goes by they, them pronouns. Bronte attended Brandeis from 2012 to 2016 and created their own interdisciplinary major, arts, identity, and community building. While Bronte was at Brandeis, they were a tour guide for admissions, co-directed Hairspray, and they also choreographed The Wiz. They're currently working as the creative director for Lead to Life, and they're also an educator for Weaving Earth, a nature connection and ancestral arts skills school. During COVID, Bronte has taken up candle making and is also working on a mockumentary called Soma Tonglin. The moderators on this call are Allison Judd, Danielle Friedman, and myself, Zoe. Just a little bit about us. Allison graduated from Brandeis in 2004 with a double major in painting and art history. She continued to earn her post-bac certificate at Brandeis also in 2005. While she was an undergrad, she sang in the Brandeis a cappella group Mangina, and she also met her husband, who neither sang nor studied art. Currently, she's living with her family on Cape Cod, but typically they live in Brookline, where she works for her home studio. Allison has spent quarantine teaching her children, her dog, and working on her sourdough starter. Danielle is an artist, educator, and advisor. She earned her BA from Brandeis in studio art in 2009 and had a post-bac certificate in 2012 and her MFA in painting and printmaking from Yale in 2015. She currently lives in Manhattan, but not for long. She's about to fly to Israel for 6 months to teach in Eilat. Finally, my name is Zoe. I went to Brandeis from 2009 to 2013, and I had a double major in art history and business. Currently, I work at a hospitality design company, and I just moved to Chicago, and they have this thing where everyone discusses the deep dish pizza, but they don't talk about thin crust pizza. I ordered a thin crust pizza to compare it to New York, and they cut it into party squares. I don't know what that is, but it's not a slice. Anyway, while we continue to explore pizza options, I figured we could also get started on the event. If you guys have any questions throughout the event, you can definitely write it in the chat, which I think you can find at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat button and you can write your question there. I'd also like to mention that today's event is being recorded for future viewings by those who couldn't make it for today's Zoom. And that's about it. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have a Q&A session after, and if you have questions, again, leave them in the chat. Thanks.
So welcome everyone, and just to run through a very fast overview of the format. We have our 3 artists here, Marlon, Bronte, and Naomi. You can all give a wave so we know who you are. We are going to present, we've created 3 small videos. They're about 9 to 10 minutes each of these artists and their spaces with their work, a pretty in-depth view of their life and their world. We're going to present these videos to you one after the next, so you get to know each of these 3 artists. And then we're going to have a live Q&A with the artists here present, and we'll have a discussion. We'll also have time for some questions afterwards for anyone who is engaged in the discussion. So I will go ahead and start those videos.
I think of myself as a multidisciplinary artist, right? But just as an artist. So I'm calling it from Boston, Mass, Jamaica Plain is where my studio is located. I was born in Guyana, South America, and I grew up here in Boston. Lived in Boston majority of my life. And, in terms of thinking about art, it was a very different experience for me growing up because it was really more about culture, so I grew up with, people who were doing creating masks, creating, different images and clothing for festivals and events, right, that are related to carnival. And so I grew up with a culture where, there wasn't a separation between art and as a institution in terms of the academic aspect around art. Art was more about just the self-expression. And it came through from a cultural impetus that was definitely based around Africa, right? But also around the Guyanese culture.
What are you committed to as an artist?
It's an interesting question. What are you committed to? I think I'm committed to trying to be a vehicle and express some of the information and ideas and concepts that come to me that I feel that are important and try to share those with the world.
How would you say your time at Brandeis impacted the way you see the world as an artist?
I think my time at Brandeis really did 2 things. One is it gave me an understanding around how do you think about the world as a creative, and what model do you create for yourself? What does that look like? And I think Brandeis has, and is an environment that encourages creativity and exploration. By year, we call ourselves the late night crew, so we're always there late night. There's Ari, Felberg Tam, that's we were that late night crew that came into the studio and just worked. But then I had, the sports aspect of it, which was the whole body kinesthetic, being an athlete and playing for the judges and having the opportunity to see the breadth and kind of, expand, your thinking around these content areas and subject matters allow you to become a richer person. So that, I think that's the best way of what I think my experience at Brandeis illustrated to me and showed me.
We definitely overlap in some of our classes. So it's fun to hear you talking about, definitely the professors who are all still there today, teaching, new students every day. Okay, so I think now that we know a little bit more kind of about you and your history, let's move in a little bit to your work. What does a typical day look like for you in your studio or in your life in general as an artist? And
I have to first start off with I have 2 beautiful children, son and daughter, Marley and Bradley. And then I have, I'm married. And so I have an amazing wife. And, it starts with family first for me. And the studio it isn't secondary, but there's always that, it's kind of a wave. It's going up, down, and you got to kind of keep this healthy balance. But I'm an educator, arts educator. So I teach in Boston Public Schools. And then I also do some adjunct work where my day, I think, starts with, making sure that, some of the benchmarks or steps and processes that I have in place are there. One is, what are the overall projects that I have on deck, and what are the deadlines for those projects? Being an artist and an arts educator, I flow kind of fluidly between studio practice and designing programming for large groups. Most of it's art-based, but it does have a design element to as well.
How would you consider your work political? It seems like a lot of your work has to do with kind of place and being able to like find your place and how you fit in. So I would love to hear like a little bit more about, the conceptual parts of your work and how you think about your work, especially with the political background that we're at today.
A lot of the work that I create has been about dealing with issues around the Black male body, primarily looking at it from the lens of like sports, and also looking at it from the lens of like ritual. When I think about politics, it's the politics of me just being here and having this conversation with you, growing up in Boston and the Dorchester area, being a first generation immigrant, also, graduating from, with the undergrad and going get a master's from Yale and all that stuff. There's politics behind that because of the system in which we all kind of live in, right? And the idea that, those who have been privileged have more opportunities than others, right, to excel. My work is about my path navigating all of those spaces. And just because of that, there is going to be a political lens. So it's even more heightened with the areas, situations around Black Lives Matter, around police violence, around institutional racism. These isms are more heightened. It's always in flux because it's about the viewer's interpretation of my body in juxtaposition or of what I produce. I'd love to say that someone says, hey, he's just an artist. But in most cases, they'll look and say he's a Black artist, right? I'd love to say that they just meet me as an artist. But the society we live in has different stereotypes and different ideas of what that body represents in terms of critical thinking in art. So there's the politics of the body, the politics of the space that I exist in, and also the politics of the conceptual framework in which my ideas exist.
Your response is like exactly how I feel as well about, work being political. So I appreciate, your candidness and your answer, and, having that conversation, I think, is really important.
Thank you so much.
Maybe show us some of the work that you've been up to, and we can kind of hear a little bit more about some of the actual pieces.
Luckily, I have a trusty assistant.
Perfect.
So thank you so much, Annie. So I've been looking at Ethiopian and looking at early Byzantine images of saints. And so I started doing a lot of these smaller studies of and replacing the Western portrait or the head with that of someone of color who's Black. And so I've had this kind of fascination with exploring ideas around Blackness and how that has a universal sense, a universal space for identity making. And then we can. Thank you so much, Anne. So let's just go outside. I'll show one of these larger pieces. I've been working on this piece. Once again, using these symbols. I had an opportunity. I received the MFA traveling fellowship, and I went to my country of Guyana. And while I was in Guyana, I found that I'd never seen a mosque next to like a Christian church next to like a Hindu temple. Never seen it. So I came back thinking about how I could bring these ideas of that kind of collective experience of being Guyanese into my work.
And these are based on those small drawings that you've been working on?
Yes, yeah. Those are based on the small drawings I've been doing. And then this is kind of, so I talked earlier about using the geometry of the basketball court. And so what you're seeing is that I take like the free throw line, I take the outer the 3-point line. I take all of that, the geometry from the court, and I re-articulate it into kind of like, my own language, if you want to call it that. I also position my body in as a part of, a series of works that I did that was looking at, the transformative feeling or effect of basketball, not only as a sport, but as a transcendent kind of ritualistic experience for Black males within the context of America.
I was able to see your work on your website, and I love that series that you had done with you kind of in all these different places with the basketball.
Oh yeah, the passing series, yes.
Anything else you want to share before we stop recording?
Super excited to have this opportunity to kind of take you guys on a trip through my studio and kind of see some of the things that I'm working on.
Naomi, we're standing in your studio. I'm hoping that we can just have a quick tour, and I'd like you to explain a few things that you're working on and just a little bit about how you found your studio space.
Oh, okay. So let me flip this view and I could take you on a tour. That's the entrance over here. So you walk in and this is my space. Yeah, I'm in Crown Heights in Brooklyn. I've been in the building since 2010.
Great. It's a really nice spot. You get nice light.
Yeah, and I have windows. Maybe I could show you the view. It's really rainy day in New York, but you could see it's kind of a really Brooklyn view with the train tracks. Yeah, we're on Bergen Street between Franklin and Plaza.
Do you have anything in your studio that you always need with you in order to work effectively?
Yes, my favorite tool. I use cement, so this is my favorite tool.
And just for the audience, what is this?
It's a palette knife. I think a trowel even, but I bought it at the paint store, so it is for painting. But I mixed my cement with it, so yeah, it's my favorite tool. And then I of course have it here. Let's flip this view. I of course have it in like very different sizes and shapes.
I would love if you could just explain your process a little bit, and I'd love to talk to you about the materials that you're using. They're very cool.
Yeah, thank you. So I start the work using a photograph. So this is the photograph that I glued to canvas, and I take my own photography, and you can see it's made out of a stretcher bar. It's stretched on a stretcher bar that I also make, and the canvas is stretched, and then the photograph is glued to it. And then I cut holes in the photograph. And then in each hole, I stretch lace. And I have a ton of lace. All these bins are full of lace that I buy and collect by color and by pattern. And then each hole gets its own lace color, so it changes from I kind of make the decision of which lace pattern and color according to what's happening in the photographic image. The color, like this color matches that. Actually, let me take you to a better example here. Once I fill all the holes with lace, you could see that this has pink lace because it's pink, or this has turquoise in relationship to this. So once everything is full of lace, I push cement through the back. And here, I could show you a back of a painting. So you could see that's where I use my trowel or my painting knife to push in the cement on the back, and then it comes out this way, and you could see the relationship with the colors around. And I also use the photograph, the seam of the photograph ends here, and then this is cement and lace.
One of the things that I was so drawn to in your work is that a lot of it has to do with these empty spaces and the way that you are literally taking away and constructing it after you've taken the photograph, kind of makes the photograph into a living sculpture. I was hoping you could explain a little bit about how you came across the lace and cement combination and why it's important to your work.
Yeah, so I was at Brandeis at the time actually, and I was trying to paint from photographs of my home. And so I would try to paint cement, and I got really frustrated trying to depict cement with oil paint. And the slickness of the material was in kind of didn't work out with the, with the kind of toughness or like the texture of cement that is so like, not smooth and slick. And so I was thinking of what can I, like as somebody who was a post-bac student, somebody gave me advice and said, why don't you use the actual material? I was making a project for advanced drawing class as a senior, and I wanted the cover of this book of drawings to actually be cement. And so the tech at the time, Ian Boyd, said to me, why don't you use cement? And so I was like, oh, and he said, go to Arthur and get some cement from him. I'm sure he'll let you take some. And so I mixed it, and everybody at my final review when I was a senior talked about the covers of this book, which I still have. And I was like, oh, well, if everybody's talking about this thing, it must be interesting. And for me, it was interesting too, to work with the actual material rather than trying to make a depiction of something. And so when I got to graduate school that fall, I bought my first bag of cement, and I still buy cement. It's here. I keep it in a plastic bag and in a box, and I use it. It's Portland cement. And then I made for a long time, I made just gray. I just made gray squares. And I was in graduate school, and everybody was talking to me about minimalism. And I was like, minimalism is great, but I wanted to talk about the relationship I had to my home. And maybe this is a good, to one's place, right? Space. And so then I kind of also got tired of making these square abstractions. So I started looking at the world, what else can cement be, in relationship to? And I started putting cement on cardboard and on my photographs in a very as though it was paint. And it was crumbling and falling apart. So I had to learn about the properties of cement. And then one day I went to the fabric store and I found, I looked at lace and I was like, oh my God, lace has holes and I can push the cement through it. And I was at the time pushing cement through window screens. And so looking for things that can contain the cement. And so the lace was an amazing discovery because there's so many different colors and patterns. And so I bought a lot of lace and I pushed it through. And then I loved the conversation that I had in the studio where my professors at grad school were saying, oh, lace, the domestic, the feminine, the home. I was like, yes, it is about intimacy. It's about it's about our livelihood. It's about a place. It's about my relationship to this place. It's about my home or my longing for home or how, it's conflicted and so forth. So yeah, so that was a good territory to go to.
I work at an art consulting firm that puts artwork into hotels and hospitality spaces. One of the things that we have is an online gallery where people can go on and potentially purchase artwork through our website. A lot of startups for art have now been focused on creating virtual galleries. I'm curious what your opinion is on how that changes or influences your artwork And if it's something that you're interested in moving forward with in the future.
Although I think like the internet and online Zoom and online shows are great because they allow this, you don't have to be in New York anymore to see shows. You don't have to, come to Brooklyn, to Crown Heights to do a studio visit, but you miss other elements of being present with the actual paintings or the actual works.
It's so hard to experience an artwork online because, like you said, you can see it and you can have a very different idea of what it is in your head versus experiencing it in person. You really get the entire feel for the story that the artist is trying to tell.
And the physicality of the actual object, like even paintings that are made with oil paint have a physical presence.
How did going to Brandeis influence your path as an artist, and what did it teach you?
I'm really grateful for my time at Brandeis. I came in wanting to be a photographer and I left being a painter. And that had an extreme, change the trajectory of what I make and who I am as an artist. I really had excellent teachers who really cared and were passionate well beyond, what they were getting compensated. And there was really a great sense of community of artists. And as I left Brandeis and went to graduate school, and then now I'm teaching at different liberal arts colleges and art school, I appreciate even more the art education I got at Brandeis, the kind of care and community that we had there. Some of my best colleagues and friends are still from Brandeis, from the art program, and some of them are still artists and some of them are not, but we're all close and I cherish these relationships. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll give you another swing of the studio space and everything that I am making and exploring a little bit. Like I made some sculptures that I want to make life-size. I'm thinking about expanding the process. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you in real life.
Awesome. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Yeah, we're so excited, Brandeis community, to learn more about your work and to get to know who you are as an artist in the world. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Bronte. I go by they, them pronouns. I am calling in at this moment from unceded Ohlone territory in Oakland, California. I'm surrounded by oak trees and lots of birds. There's a lot of more than human life around me. The work that I feel most committed to is drawn by a quote from a Black acupuncturist he calls himself a Black acupuncturist, who was the former health and wellness director for a prison abolition org based out of LA called Dignity and Power Now. And he has this beautiful quote where he says Black wellness is the antithesis to state violence. It's in an article he wrote called Wellness and the Black Molecular Future in Huffington Post. And that's been kind of my guiding work of what does it mean to consecrate Black wellness in public. I identify as a transdisciplinary artist because it really blurs genre. I'm very interested in ritual arts, ceremony, public prophetic practice, kind of bringing the way of congregating people back in the day through church or synagogue or through the mosque into the public space, and to bring everyone's the community's art practice out. What does it feel like to actually create the experiences that help us feel liberated? So this image is from a ceremony in Oakland. We've worked across Atlanta and Oakland. We're about to start working in Puerto Rico on a ceremony. We're we call ourselves a translocal collective that's hosting these ceremonies across Black communities, Black diasporic communities. This image is of a gun washing with santeros, in front of Oakland City Hall at the end of a march called the Reclaim the Radical King March that happens annually on Martin Luther King Day. And these dancers and ceremonialists they're at the altar. If you can see behind, this is a public space where folks are sitting behind them, and they are washing the guns. They're rebuking the spirit of the guns. They're blowing smoke on them. They're beating them with plants. And this is right before Black mothers and families who've been impacted by police brutality and intercommunal gun violence are about to share their stories for a town free of violence and process these guns to the furnace. That's the image of the crucible that's in front of Oakland City Hall, where folks brought up the guns to the furnace. The main collaborator we work with, his name is James Brenner. At that bottom half, you can see where there's some molds where when the guns were poured through the crucible or when they were melted into the crucible, the other accompanying metal artists brought the ladles to these molds that reflected stars. And the constellations that were laid out were the stars that were above a brother named Oscar Grant, who was killed 10 years prior at Fruitvale Station in Oakland. So there was a kind of invocation of like, how do we reimagine that evening? How do we even reimagine time, perhaps through like changing time and gathering today and bringing these guns into these stars and casting prayers and prophecy. This is an image with one of our shovels we've made from weapons with James Brenner. These are local dancers from a group called Oyanike. Another image of the crucible. This is one of the shovels close up. In a day where we hosted something with the friends called Permaculture Action Network. We had something called a Permaculture Action Day with an Indigenous woman-led land trust in Oakland called Saborite Land Trust. This is a ceremonialist at another gathering in Oakland holding up a World War II sniper rifle that we were gifted to do a blacksmithing ceremony with some folks called Raw Tools. This is Oscar Grant's uncle, Uncle Bobby. Multiple families came up and actually beat the weapon to transform it into a trowel, which I can show you those physical objects in a moment in the room. We had another ceremony on Reclaim the Radical King this past January for the Moms for Housing movement out in Oakland in honor of housing justice for houseless families. And that's the image of the stars that we made from that ceremony the year prior. This is my colleague, our trauma stewardship coordinator at Led to Life, who's thinking about what does our everyday work look like with our families besides just this public work, which is very vulnerable.
We spoke earlier a bit about art as social practice and art as a way to transform and to bring spiritual awareness and change. And it's really important, the work that you're doing. So focused on specific communities, and it also is universal at the same time. So let's talk a little bit about Brandeis. You studied at Brandeis. Tell us about your experience there. When did you graduate? What did you study? And what was most impactful for you as an artist?
Okay, thank you so much. I graduated in 2016, so 4 years ago. It's been a journey since that graduation. I designed a major, arts, identity, and community building. Brandeis was so impactful for me. Even just being invited allowed me to be in gratitude and reflection about the way that my time there served as a rite of passage into my work. I am so grateful to the Black Studies Department at Brandeis and so many professors who I just feel so much kinship for. Previously, Jasmine Johnson, Greg Childs, Aliyah Abdul-Rahman in the Black Studies Department were so influential to my work. And in the arts department, I actually applied to Brandeis because I got a pamphlet in my senior year of high school that listed a department called Peace Building and the Arts under Cindy Cohen. So that really, that is actually why I applied, because it was the first time I saw the language of kind of what would become thinking about art as social practice. And Cindy Cohen was so influential to me, Gordy Feldman, the Peace Department at Brandeis, Cameron Anderson in the theater department. She had like a kind of multimedia class my senior year where you could work across mediums, and it brought me into finding my language beyond just the medium of performance. So I'm so grateful because it was her work that like I ended up changing my thesis into a physical medium, into a plantable book with seeds in the pages, and it started to make me think about sculpture and function, and it definitely influenced like the work that I'm doing now, getting to kind of bridge all of those worlds together. So, and the theater department, I had a great time at Brandeis. I had a good
Yeah, we'd love to see some of these objects that you live in and are processing around. And yeah, please share what you think might be relevant, what we might like to see.
Okay, yeah. So this is one of the trowels, like what was crafted in the image with the blacksmithing ceremony. These are crafted by an arts collective called Raw Tools. This is one of my favorite ones because the wood is so nice. We received some wood from felled trees from a group called Sacramento Tree Foundation, and this wood is just so beautiful. You can see that it says, "As we decompose violence, may the earth again be free." And here's the handle. They're very heavy shovels because this is actually the part that is made from a gun. And this is the mold. Yeah, you can see it kind of up close with their little logo with the gun kind of shooting out the plant, and the shovel says "Led to Life" on it. This is one of the stars. They're so heavy. I wish you could feel it. The weight is so big. I've actually done a performance recently of really moving with this as a kind of like just finding where it led me.
How do you think about your work in terms of it being political work?
Mm-hmm. What brought me to this work was that my friend at 21, who was a young Black artist, was killed by a 14-year-old, who was a young Black teenager, who was tried as an adult for the murder of my friend. I remember my friend, another friend, sending me an image of a bike path that these folks called Studio Rosegard made in the Netherlands, where it's a glow-in-the-dark bike path that's alluding to Van Gogh's Starry Night. And I was thinking about like, it's so beautiful, and like, it immediately made me think of my friend Xavier because he was killed on a bike path. And I was thinking about this kind of humbling of the monument, humbling of, instead of a monument to Van Gogh, they actually made it real. They made it something useful. They made it something beautiful that people could interact with. And I remember thinking, if the bike path had been glow in the dark, could that child have killed Xavier? And not just like, is it just a glow in the dark bike path or aesthetic that changes us? But what other things does that mean if a city cares about just the aesthetic and beauty way of a bike path? That your attention changes. Everything becomes political in my identity, like in the identities that I hold and how I'm read in the world and what it means to work with a gun. But it's really not about resistance. It's really about, what do I want for me and my community and my people? And how do we do that together?
Thank you so much, Bronte. I'm so looking forward to our live Q&A. And
Yes.
okay, so welcome, Bronte, Marlon Forrester, and Naomi Saffron Han. I hope that those
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today.
videos.
My name is
Oh,
Megan
wow.
Remington. I am
Sorry, my YouTube wanted to join us, but so we're gonna get into conversation. I hope that those videos give you a small window into the work and the world of these artists. We had much lengthier discussions with each of these artists, so you can imagine the amount of thought and work that they're up to. We're gonna start with a few questions, and let's see. Whoever feels most moved, Marlon, Bronte, Naomi, you can unmute yourselves. All right, now I just ask you all, let's see. All right, here we are. So we are going to start with the words ritual and prayer space came up in our conversations with each of us a lot. How would you define ritual, and how does ritual connect to your creative process?
I want to allow someone else to go first. So want to be a gentleman here, please. You guys, anyone else want to chime in? Naomi? Brian? All right, so I'll jump. I'm sorry, I'll jump in. So
Okay, great.
so
And Marla, actually, I saw in the chat box, Bronte had mentioned her interest in you speaking about those performances. We saw some images of you laying on the floor outside with the basketball, and she said, "Hey, let us know about that." So that's also kind of in the realm of ritual, if you wanted to touch
okay.
on.
I'll move very quickly. For me, ritual is a ceremony based on a series of actions. And ritual is the reconstruction and deconstruction of a concept or idea for the fulfillment or the enlightenment of others. I think of ritual specifically in that series of passing about celebrating an ancestor. That series where you saw me laying down prone on the ground. My father passed away while I was in graduate school at Yale. And when he passed away, one of the things that I wanted to do was celebrate our connection. You know, son to father, one of the things he did for me was he would pass the ball to me. And it was very painful, but I knew that this series was a way of like healing. It was cathartic, you know? And so I throw the ball up in the air and I catch it in public spaces, but it's also about my body in the public space as a place of not only changing identity, but also thinking about power. You know, during that time, I thought about this idea of planking and of how slaves were transported from Africa to America and all, you know, all over the West Indies, throughout the diaspora. And I thought about my family, how they came to Guyana. And they probably came through that same process, being loaded, you know, in these boats, laying down prone, you know. So in that way, there is a component really to ancestor worship and transformation. So I think it's important. Ritual itself is not only identifier, but it's a way to communicate love. It's communicate our common humanity as well.
That was deep, Marla. That was deep. Thank you for sharing more about what that work meant for you and what ritual means to you. I think similarly for me, I think of ritual as ceremony and also as an agreement that you're making, that the power comes through the agreement of what the practice is and what it means to you and what it can do for you. Because I think about having spiritual practices of chanting, and chanting could not mean anything to me if I don't have the agreement that it changes my body and it changes my spirit. I also think of ritual as changing our relationship to time, because there's these kind of portals that I think ceremony can open that, yeah, brings you into more significance and more recognition. And there's ways that I think we practice ritual all of the time, but they're not considered rituals. You know, I think a lot about a friend talking about how white supremacy, capitalism, patriarchy all have traditions that they uphold and we embody. And to actually think of them as ritual, to think of them as having kind of ceremonial aspects, and how does performing our own kind of rituals or ceremony change our relationship to systems of power. I'll pass it over to Naomi.
I think you guys spoke beautifully about it, and I don't actually think ritual is a main theme in my, I mean, I have in my practice there are rituals, and I'm very process based. So that kind of ritual of making the work, but I actually don't think it's kind of a central theme, as though, like, similarly that it comes up in your work, and you spoke about it beautifully. So I'm gonna give it back to the moderator. I love this. The power comes from the agreement. I think it's beautiful.
So our next question is, what is the most important lesson you've learned during your career that you wish you'd known as a younger member of the art world?
I can jump in because I thought about this. We got a heads up on the questions. I wish, and something that I still need to practice is patience. I think it's also maybe a generational thing where we are very impatient. And I think that this is a very long game, and having patience for the work and for what you want to achieve with it is really important to, let things happen in the time they need, and both in the studio, but also in terms of like getting to an audience. So cultivating a space in the art world and so forth.
Great. Excellent, Naomi. For me, just to follow up, I think that the art that you make will never be about you. The art that you make has to and will be about a spiritual journey in this life. For me, it's about the message you leave to the next generation, to guide them to reflect on their own humanity. And I think, that is a message or a gift that we have as artists, to leave how we have experienced this life for others to reflect on, to critique, to do whatever with, but that's our message for them.
Thank you, Marlon. Yeah, I really would just emphasize that art is so essential. I feel like there are so many voices that kind of name art was a hobby or something you did on the side, and it, you couldn't make money and you can't be well and you can't provide, for your family or whatever. And I would say art is so essential to our environment's health, to people's health, to imagining the future. I just feel like, I would say it's so critical, and that to trust in abundance and to work in community, and that you will be provided for to make what you are imagining.
And also, just to piggyback on that, I think the phrase art world is really about a construct. The world we live in is around us. It surrounds us, and it envelops us. And as we speak, our own voice is art, right? How we speak and how we emote and connect with each other. And so I think that's something that we have to think about, is what is the construct in which people are placing on themselves, and whether that's a power that we want to relinquish, or we want to own, or we want to push against.
Yeah, so the next question I have for you guys, which kind of touches on some of that, is, do you make your art with an audience in mind? And if so, can you share who that would be?
I can jump in. I think about, I think there's a few different audiences. When I go to the studio, I have nobody in mind except myself. And like, what do I my vision or my process. But then when completing the work and sending it out to the world, I do think about an audience, because the work only comes full circle when there's a viewer. I think of my work as a vessel. So if I create the vessel embedded with meaning and send it off to the world, the vessel only completes its journey when somebody else embeds their meaning within it. But I do think about an audience in the sense, and I'm sorry if the video, I wanted to make two disclaimers for the video. One is I'm old school and my studio has no internet. So it was all, the Zoom kind of video was for my iPhone. So apology for the bad quality and also kind of the holding close-ups. And then also, I grew up in Haifa in Israel, and my parents are here, so I'm very excited to have you join the Zoom with like COVID. Distance has collapsed, and it's really great. And I make work about being Israeli, and so I think about a viewer that recognizes the titles of my paintings, recognizes the place, the architecture, has a relationship with the same place that I grew up in. It doesn't mean that it's a better audience. It just means that it's more, that it might have a more easier or faster or a different appreciation, right? Than a viewer who's not immersed in that culture or those like visual cues. And then that's one audience. And I would say another audience is the art world audience that is different than the general public, right? So people who already have some appreciation for art and art making. But I think all of these audiences are important, and I'm interested in engaging with all of them.
I think about the audience of the experience. And I think that the viewer comes to any work of art with a different set of experiences. And so when I create my work, although, I do work that is multimedia, right? So I do some performance, I do painting, I also do large installations, right? And so these large installation pieces are interactive, where, 200, 300 people will work with me to help create a piece together. And so sometimes it's about also a teaching experience, right? Art is about a ever evolving moment that can continue depending on the construct in which it's in, and that's usually temporal. So my work encourages others to think critically, not just about the game of basketball, but around how we make and how we move and how we shape together and talk together. And so there's, the aspects of play come into my work. And so the audience has to be ready to engage with that, whether through the symbols that I create or iconography or the requests that I ask for them to uphold certain values and to move within that space as a collective.
Hey guys, thank you so much for that feedback. And I feel like that actually leads us to our next question. Each of your works relate in some way to this idea of transformation, whether it's physical, spiritual, or both. 2020, as we all know, has been literally a transformative year. It's flipped normalcy on its head. Has this year had any major effect on your artwork or art process? What challenges have you come across and what successes have you found from it, if any?
I can share that I have been it's been a time of grief. I definitely don't want to dismiss the grief of this year and its impact on all of us. And being disconnected, especially for my work that's around congregation. And I think also, I'm sure for y'all's work of just experiencing work in public is powerful, to be impacted and to be in front of the body of work. So I am thinking about the importance of gathering, and especially this summer of Black unrest in this country. It was really hard to feel like, how do we show up with this work that's so needed, of ceremony, of changing our relationship to time, of healing, when it's also just not safe. But I've excitedly also been thinking about this year made me really go deeper into the histories of fugitivity, of like Black folks in maroon communities leaving enslavement, leaving the publics and hiding away or stealing away. And the intersection of Sabbath. My partner is Jewish Mexican, and we've been thinking about this tradition of crypto Judaism and Jewish folks, even in hiding or fleeing, also holding Sabbath at the center. And we've been hosting a fellowship of 15 sanctuary makers, people who do sanctuary across medium, housing justice, reimagining convent spaces across the US, et cetera, musicians, and sending them these parcels in the mail where we're not speaking together, but they're in this ritual crafting fellowship, and they're crafting materials to honor Sabbath. And it's a really deep, we would have never imagined that work of sending audio and sending these parcels, which one will go out today. I don't think if COVID hadn't happened. And it's been a really special, quiet way to offer ritual across distance without being able to gather.
Anyone else?
Marlon, do you have something? No? I just think that one can find a silver lining in a lot of things, and I think Zoom coming together this way and reimagining different ways to connect because we can't be in person also allowed for, like, it was really exciting at the beginning of the call. Danielle read, everybody wrote in the chat where they're from. And so I think Zoom, like the fact that we're all staying home allowed us to reimagine a different way to come together, which then kind of allows for different distances to be bridged and make smaller. And I experienced it both in a professional way with these kinds of events and other artist talks, and then also with my family, which were always far away, but it allowed for, you know, more family to come together on the Zoom, which was very exciting. And so it's a difficult time, but I think there's always some small joys.
So Naomi, it took a moment for me to speak because, 2020 has just been definitely a kind of psychological and physiological kind of traumatic state, right? Specifically, thinking about George Floyd, but then also thinking about my son, who's 6 years old, or now 7. And what is the future that America will represent for him? And whether or not, the values that we hold up, whether through the Constitution or what have you, is represented in how we communicate with the police, how we communicate with each other, how we communicate, just as a society and culture. I think the window and framework of Zoom has become a form of language, right? That we've had to reconstruct and understand the code of it, right? And it's allowed us to visit and to be able to move through spaces that frequently people do not come into without having, permission or physically entering. So, I've definitely been humbled, and I've learned to respect the fact that humans will adapt, right? Through crisis, through pandemic, we're going to adapt, and we're going to continue to evolve. So that's what I take from 2020.
It's been such a gift to be able to see what you're up to and to hear your thoughts and your personal experiences. Thank you so much for sharing these thoughts and experiences with us. I would love to hear from the audience. If we can open it up, we're getting kind of close to time. So if you have to leave us, we totally understand. If you want to stick around for 5 or 8 more minutes, and we have some really thoughtful people here from the Brandeis community and beyond. So if you have any thoughts, questions, please pop them in the box or raise your hand for Bronte, for Marlon, or for Naomi. So is it Ali or Ali?
It's Ali, yeah.
Ali.
All right, I have a random weird question for you. This one is directed at Marlon and Bronte, actually, specifically, because I stopped capitalizing my name like years ago. As long as I can remember, I've never capitalized it. And I noticed Marlon and Bronte also don't capitalize their name. And I'm wondering if that's just like an accident, just typing, or if it's on purpose. Thank you also for sharing your work.
Bronte, you can go first, but I can just quickly say it was a mistake.
Oh, thanks. Political and like.
Mine is definitely on purpose. I'm definitely following a Black feminist tradition of decapitalizing all things and including my name about like, there's something about the name of just like, how does it, I don't know, something about decapitalizing feels like it like changes me as the capital thing. And and aesthetically, I've done it since 6th grade. I just like the little b and a little b, you know? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that question. 2 things. One, yes, names hold so much power and purpose, and they are lineage and the shapes of shapes. And this is a whole other conversation. So I'm so glad you brought it into this speaker. And I also want to say you gave attention to the subline of our event, which is It's Political, because we chose these 3 artists because they each deal with a lot of political content and thought. And so I want to I actually do have one kind of big question, and I was hesitant because I want to be really conscious of everyone's time. But if you'd like to stick around, I think this is a really significant way to close this conversation. So we have one more question for each of you. And it is, so we spoke about your work being inherently political because of your layered identity. So as complex beings, what is one part of your identity that you found most challenging to address through your work, and why?
As complex, I'm going to jump in and say that, you know, for me, being multicultural, being Guyanese and being American and existing in the body that I exist in, you know, I think how you move through that space of culture is important, but it also, you know, it forces you to think about, you know, what are your limitations, right? What will society accept as, you know, your truth? And then also within that is that we're all made of flesh, and our spirit is truly the representation of our, you know, of our consciousness. And how can you take what you see within society in the world and allow your spirit and your truth to exist in relationship to that? And in that way, your identity is consistent and it's liberating.
I see you moving forward, Naomi, and I just want to say, we're in the Brandeis community. Naomi and I went to Brandeis around the same time, and I've always been super fascinated with your work because we're both really interested in the idea of home. And I think I just want to bring that word in. Home is a political construct also. And, you know, Brandeis definitely is engaged with work around the home, and Marlon as well in a more abstract way. So I just want to call attention because we didn't really go deep into what your photographs are about, Naomi, and what kind of spaces you're depicting, and how that is also a huge part. So kind of calling on you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to Jenna, who's also is here and was part of our trio of years at Brandeis, which had such good.
Gotta say Joe also, who's like,
yeah, and Alfredo too.
Oh, well done. Is Joe here?
Alfredo, our most brilliant professors at Brandeis. We
okay, really... is Tori here? It's Tori and Joe. Okay, Susan Lickman, is Susan out there?
I was gonna give Bronte the space to speak, but since you called on me, I'll try to be very short. My work is about, I mean, I think COVID and the coronavirus made all of us, even in the most comfortable homes, feel uncomfortable. And I think it brought forth the idea of what is home and what is a sanctuary and what is our lives, you know, and when we can't go outside, what happens to a place we took for granted, right? And what is become, maybe the comfort became uncomfortable, right? And it's a very complex kind of conversation. But I just thought about your question because I thought about being a woman. I think it's something that as a female artist in 2020, I sometimes feel that we forget how difficult it is. And that we, with everything that the feminist movement has done in the last 30, 40 years, we just forget that it's still a struggle and that there's still expectations and there's still gaps. And I'm not saying, I'm just saying as also how you talk about it and do you talk about it? And so I found that kind of what I thought is more fleeting in the work, that it's there, especially in the dichotomy between lace and cement, but I don't necessarily speak about it. Or, I don't necessarily want to heighten the fact that I feel sometimes discriminated against in the art world because I'm a woman, right? Anyway, so just maybe less an optimistic view of things, but, I give it to you, Bronte.
Thank you both for your answers. Mine kind of is between those two shares as well. I have been thinking about I've been thinking about some language I read recently on de-indigenization and the de-indigenization of folks from the island of Boriquen, or what is now called Puerto Rico. My family is also, my father's family is Puerto Rican, and my mother's family is Black. Puerto Rican also means Black, but also means Spanish and Portuguese, and also means Taino. And I haven't really brought that, I haven't so much brought myself into, I grew up around Black people, and I grew up like being read as Black. And I haven't found, not having grown up on the island, I haven't yet found what my relationship to that land is. So it brings up some complicated relationships around home and process and symbolism. And next year feels like a dance towards like leaning back into that source and heritage work and going to sit with my grandparents. Yeah.
And remember a really wise piece of advice that Naomi brought into this conversation is patience, because we allow the work to come to be. So definitely important to spend time with our elders, with our family, in the lands that we're connected to. And with that, we will thank everyone so much for being here and sharing your time with us, tuning in. And we would really like to thank the artists, Bronte Bellis, Naomi Saffron Hahn, Marlon Forrester, and most importantly, my teammates in putting this together as part of the Brandeis Arts Alumni Network, Zoe Messenger and Elson Judd. Thank you to Courtney Sunkar, who is kind of the mastermind technical head of organizing this, and as well Amy Merrill, who's here and is also a member of the Brandeis Arts Alumni Network. We are going to put some links in the chats for you, and Allison is going to close our conversation with some really important information.
Yeah, I just want to say it was such an incredible conversation. Thank you all. On behalf of the Brandeis Alumni Arts Network, we want to thank all of the artists for participating in our second virtual studio visit. Thank you to Brandeis University for hosting this event on Zoom. This entire event is entirely volunteer run. So I want to give a special thanks to Danielle Freeman for editing the video that you saw today. As we come to the end of 2020, we want to emphasize the importance of supporting the arts and artists. This year has been one full of hardship for many, and we encourage you to support your local artists, alum artists, and the artists we have highlighted today. In the chat, we have included links to the artist website, as well as some links about special projects that they are working on. We hope to continue this series of virtual studio visits, and we welcome the feedback that you are willing to share. Please email us at artsalumni@list.brandeis.edu. Courtney will include that link as well. We look forward to sharing more artists with you in the new year. Wishing everyone a happy and healthy holiday season. Thank you all again for participating.